I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Rachel, and this is Neurodivergent Voices, the podcast amplifying the voices and lived experience of the neurodivergent community.
We're licensed occupational therapists who specialize in the brain and are neurodivergent ourselves. Join us every so often in this podcast that is for you and by you, the neurodivergent community.
If you're interested in learning more about neurodiversity and joining a vibrant community of neuro-inclusive adults, head to our website, divergecommunity.com.
Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled. Let's get to it.
Hello, everyone. We're back on the Neurodivergent Voices podcast, and I'm here to introduce you guys to one of my closest friends, Izzie. So I'm just going to let her kind of introduce herself and say all the cool things that she is.
Hello, everyone. My name is Izzie. I am someone who is a disabled person with cerebral palsy, and I'm a sexual health and wellness advocate for people with disabilities. But full-time, I am an employment program manager helping people with disabilities obtain and maintain employment.
I'm sorry if you hear my dog in the background. She is not happy that she can't join us directly by our feet. So if you hear moaning, that is what it is.
She just has to be the start of the show.
Also, Aunt Izzie is in the room, and she cannot be touching Aunt Izzie, so we're having big emotions. But obviously, you're on the Neurodivergent Voices podcast. Can you explain kind of why you identify as neurodivergent, or when you learn about the term, all that fun jazz?
Yeah, so having cerebral palsy, which is a damage to the brain before or after birth, so that makes me a little neurospicy, and then just having some different family dynamics. I think that everyone in my family has a little bit of neurospice, so then that automatically attributes that to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. What would you say kind of are your strengths and challenges that you see every day because of your neurodivergence?
A strength would be attention to detail.
Oh, yeah.
Problem solving, things like that. Weakness, I would say procrastination at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
A little paralysis from wanting to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, I want to hear a little bit more about what you do. It sounded really interesting. So you said you work as an employment specialist?
Yeah.
Okay.
So technically employment program manager now, but when I'm working face-to-face people, it's employment specialist. So I help people work with those interpersonal skills needed to maintain employment. So working on the soft skills, how to communicate with coworkers, your boss, how to do a job interview, your resume, things like that. So not like the hard skills we needed to work, but all those social cues that we need to maintain jobs.
Wow, and that's super relevant for, the kinds of people that we support and work with too.
Yeah.
That's a major occupation is your employment, and be able to find strategies to help them be successful.
And what I love about it, and what I always say this to you heard me say I'm a sexual health and wellness advocate. To me, sexuality also goes into employment because there's a lot of social cues around sexuality that can bleed into employment of how to appropriately interact with coworkers.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really realize that too sometimes, how it can those social cues can be hard to interpret, and making sure that nothing inappropriate happens with other employees.
Yeah, that we can't date our coworkers, but it's where we spend 8 hours of our day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So kind of teaching people that okay, where can I date then? Where do I find those people? How do I keep those boundaries to keep my job and keep other people around me safe and myself?
I think that's such a valuable perspective that probably very few individuals like employment specialists or employment managers even consider.
Yeah.
Right, so I think thank you for talking about that.
Because an aspect of it, so sexuality has 16 different dimensions, and one of the different dimensions is types of relationships throughout our life.
Very exciting. Well, I can't wait for more of our sexuality talk.
Yeah, I'm excited for our sex podcast to hear just more in depth about, because I didn't know there was all these different types of Yeah. You're going to coach me on this, and I love it. Is there any types of things that you wish people would know kind of with your work and job placement or for yourself? Like a big social advocate besides like sexuality in general and how it impacts everyday social skills?
I wish employers would feel more confident to have the conversation to hire people with disabilities. I think so often it's people are afraid of accommodations. You have the prospective employee that's afraid to bring it up. They're afraid to disclose because they don't want to be discriminated against. But then you also have an employer who could be afraid because they don't know the laws and they don't know how far they can go and what's on their plate. So having a more organic conversation on both sides, I wish we could get to that point.
Yeah. That's really powerful. Because I don't think that we're at that point yet in society. And it's kind of like we want to be there, but there's also this like gray area of how do we come across these conversations.
Yes, and I feel bad for employers because so often they're made to be the bad guy. Oh, they're just not hearing me. But we need to acknowledge that there's fear in that we also need to empower them and educate them with the tools.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw a total curveball at you because that's what I love doing. I just like to have the real, honest reactions and thoughts. But we've been doing some research about disability rights and employment advocacy and stuff as it relates to neurodiversity, and I've come across quite a few resources that are specifically looking for individuals with disabilities to work for them.
Okay.
I guess my question for you is, as someone who is disabled and as someone who is in that field of disability employment, do you know more about that? And also, how does that make you feel that it's like specifically looking for someone with a disability?
I guess it would depend on their reasoning.
Yeah.
We see a lot more people that diversity, inclusion, equity conversations, and so often disability does get left out of that conversation on the table. Putting it back on the table. So I guess it would be a case by case basis. Why are they wanting to hire the person with disability? Is it because they want to create a more inclusive environment, or is it they're just trying to reach a quota?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do they know what that entails? Are they willing to go through the accommodation process? Or are they saying, oh, we're willing to hire you, but we're not willing to have the active conversation about what actual accommodations you need? So I'd have to dig deeper.
I love that response because there's just no like blanketed response there. You're right. You got to look at the intention, look at the preparedness, looking for the rationale. There's kind of like this big push in neurodiversity employment inclusion, this idea that neurodivergent, neurodistinct individuals bring unique strengths to the workplace, which I think is a really important topic to discuss. But I almost wonder if sometimes it is almost ableist in saying, we want them because...
Are they not using a stereotype?
Yeah, they're using stereotype. Yeah, exactly. Like, we want them because of their attention to detail.
And is that to say everyone has that?
Right.
Not if you don't, that's not a bad thing at all, but does everyone have a superpower?
Exactly.
Maybe not.
Exactly. And to like almost equate their worth as an employee or like their value for joining the organization as like they're going to bring this because they are autistic or
But once again, it's making maybe the disabled person be the advocate, which they may not want to be.
Yes.
I want to be an advocate, and I'm signing up for that. No, my partner, on the other hand, he gets upset about these things, but he doesn't want to be an advocate, and he has that right.
Yeah.
We can't make every disabled person be an advocate.
Yeah. That's such a powerful thing that is not said enough or not heard enough, is that just because I'm disabled doesn't mean I have any extra burden on me to be an advocate or to even set your expectations for what disability should look like. Right? Because you may be the only person in the workplace with a certain disability, but the onus is not on you to represent everyone.
Just like it's not on the other minority.
Exactly.
So we need to not put that on disabled folks either.
I like that. Especially since I think this is at the forefront of me and Rachel's brain, because last week we had sorry, my dog is just having all the feels. But last week we had a webinar talking about advocacy specifically, and kind of this whole aspect of privilege behind it, and how you have to have like a standpoint of privilege and this point of being able to want to do it. You know, if you don't want to, it's also your right to not want to be able to advocate like for yourself or others, because you don't have to put this burden on yourself. That's a whole like, and it's an extra job to advocate. You don't really think about all the extra steps that it is to advocate.
Well, self-advocacy is a skill. It's one that I teach. It's not one that's innate. It's a skill that's taught and fostered. And so that is a privilege in itself. How many people grow up where self-advocacy is not fostered or taught or encouraged in a family?
Yeah, true.
Because on some cultural barriers, self-advocacy could be seen as being disrespectful or talking back.
True.
Gosh, that is, I love that you bring up that point, because there's so much about like the neurodivergent community that is socially and culturally based. And whether something is or is not seen as a disability is kind of relying upon those cultural norms and expectations, right? So like you said, self-advocacy is a skill that is learned, and it is a cultural specific skill. So not having it in a specific culture doesn't mean anything less of you, right? That is you.
Or your family dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation that we're having, but I also recognize that this is your interview, and I want to get to know you more as a person and the things that you love doing and what your strengths are, regardless of your ability status, and not just tied to your neurodivergence.
Or your job.
Although we love talking about this shit, you know.
One thing that goes into that innate need when you have a disability, to talk about your successes before you talk about yourself. To go to, prove yourself. That we need to see what people do.
Right.
Yeah. So do we want to kind of even go further into your successes? Just because I've known you for what, like 7? Almost a decade. Oh geez, I feel old.
According to Facebook, we've been friends for 9 years.
Oh my goodness, I'm old.
Wow. That means you guys started college 10 years ago.
Yeah, you were a sophomore.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was a freshman. Yeah, so
sorority recruitment.
Sorority recruitment. Izzie made me feel right at home. Kind of knew I was at home when I met Izzie, just because we were just goofing off, and I forgot what I was talking about, but I was being my nerdy self, talking about Harry Potter.
We were talking about siblings and CP.
Oh yeah, siblings and CP. Yeah, just in general, asking like actual real person questions instead of like fake. I don't know. I feel like sorority recruitment, as cringy as it can get, it was. Yeah.
You had to be there.
Yeah, you had to be there to understand the cringe that goes on. But Izzie made me feel right at home right away. But enough talking about that situation. I just remember looking up to you as a mentor in that moment. So I wanted to bring, because you've gone through a lot of great challenges too, but also great successes. And I want you to kind of boost yourself up a bit.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Can't even think of them all.
Because there's so many.
There is.
I will say a big one for me this year was being able to go talk at Grand Valley University about sex and disability this year. So that was a big one for me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was asked to be a speaker at Grand Valley's Sex Ed Week to talk about sex and disability and assistive devices for people with disabilities. So that was exciting.
How did that opportunity come up?
They found me on Instagram.
No kidding.
Yes.
Okay, that makes me think of that whole other side of your wonderful successes.
Yeah.
You're kind of a content creator and
Yes, I sure will. So I am also on Instagram. I demonstrate my power chair because it elevates up and down.
Yeah, give your tag a little shout out here.
Yeah, right.
It's a good Instagram account to follow. So
yeah, Izzie Bullock.
Yeah, like Sandra Bullock.
Yep.
Izzie Bullock.
And Izzie with an IE, like Grey's Anatomy, not the Y.
Yeah, not the Y.
Grey's Anatomy, that's good.
I think you also had lots of good successes in college too, like lots of good opportunities brought to you by the Disability Resource Center and stuff, like the kind of the leadership roles you took.
Yeah, I was able actually in college to work at the Disability Resource Center, working with accommodations in the post-secondary setting there, which is funny, is I have a degree in higher ed, don't work in higher ed, but I do my ultimate goal, which is supporting individuals post-secondary, no matter what that looks like to them.
And then, can you explain like what your master's degree is in?
Yeah, so that's higher ed and student affairs. So my goal was, because of sorority and higher ed, I wanted to work at an institution to help make campus life more accessible. I'm sure Stephanie and Rachel can attest to this. Colleges are great at making the classroom accessible, but not so much campus life. And college life, campus life is where college life is at. I feel like I know way more about what I learned late night at the sorority house than I do when I was sitting in the classroom. That's what we really remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially just like the relationships and everything, and understanding where people come from. I think that was lots of good talks of just like your experience and everyone else's experience while on
One
campus.
of the most random subjects that we would talk about.
Yeah. And I would have to say most of our sorority members were neurospicy, so we had lots of interesting conversations.
Were you there for the one when we were talking about, I think it was all the different animal penises?
No! Rachel, your face!
Okay, I'm intrigued. Are we just gonna like roll this right into our next conversation too?
Yeah, I think we'll...
Don't know how we got on that conversation fully sober, but we did.
Okay, I also have to add that while you said that, Bronson was humping Ophelia over there, so
I feel like this clip is just going to be automatic. So this should be the intro for the first part. So kind of going back, because I want to make sure we kind of close off a good note for your interview. Not that I love this topic. We could go on for this for quite some time, and I think we will. But is there kind of any like final thoughts you have about yourself?
Well, we were talking about final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts.
And I think one thing that I find interesting is like, you guys just told me, I was like, oh, I have cerebral palsy, I'm not part of neurodivergent. And you're like, wait, yes, you are. So like, helping people understand that you don't need a particular formal diagnosis to be part of the community, I think is important. Because there's a lot of symptoms or things that you experience that you may feel alone, but knowing that you're not alone in that.
Ophelia agrees, and apparently so does Danny. We talked about this briefly, but I don't know if you knew exactly how you were a part of the neurodivergent community until like a couple minutes ago. So,
just my final thought is that I'm learning that anyone can be part of the neurodivergent community. Well, not anyone, but like much broader than a formal diagnosis.
Sorry, Bronson also has opinions on this podcast.
So many thoughts today.
Loud ones.
Yeah, loud ones. That, you know what, that is just how the world works, and I'm not apologetic for it. So,
but that like me having CP, which is a a diagnosis of the brain. There's some brain damage that makes me part of neurodivergent, which I think is important because we've been led to believe that you need this formal diagnosis of autism, to get support or to be a part of a community, and that's just not true. That we all have experiences and barriers that we could rely on support for.
I got a little bit of goosebumps there.
Well, I'm excited to talk more with you about your sex and advocacy work. So for those who want to tune in, the next podcast will be exactly that. So stick in.
Stick in, she just said. Yep. Stick it in, ladies and gentlemen. Tune in. That's what I meant.
You have Oh my goodness.
All right, stick it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Neurodivergent Voices. Interested in an interview? Email diverge cs@gmail.com to get it scheduled.